Kimi to Koete恋になるis an anime about the dangers of discrimination, where the oppressed class actively has to fight off their increased sexual urges. Some will say that the anime can't have its cake and eat it too, that it's irresponsible to have an oppressed class be portrayed this way. If a viewer were to compare this world's logic to our own discrimination, it would only further prove to increase the fear around minority groups. I, however, strongly disagree. I couldn't exactly figure out why though, until I finally found a fitting comparison. Frieren is an anime with a fantasy race called demons. Demons are portrayed as being completely evil, using their seemingly human qualities as a way to lure in human prey. Of course, if you compare demons to minorities, it's an extraordinarily offensive portrayal. Demons, however, aren't meant to mimic real-world minorities. It's an apples to oranges comparison. The beast folk walk on more of a thin tightrope, as unlike demons, beast folk do come loaded with human empathy. This means that the story this anime tells is trying to make a statement about discrimination, unlike Frieren. I think this is where the bulk of the controversy comes in. If you compare beast folk to racial minorities, wanting them to act exactly the same, you will be disappointed and offended, unable to look at the themes and messages that this story tries to convey. If beast folk acted exactly the same as racial minorities, however, then it would be a completely different story with completely different themes. Just because the beast folk are a fictional race that doesn't have any ties to any race in our world, it doesn't mean that this fictional race can't explore subject matter that is relevant to our own world. Just because beast folk have to battle off their sexual urges, it still doesn't make the discrimination against them justified. In terms of showcasing this idea, I believe that the anime succeeds at displaying exactly why this prejudice is unwarranted. If Tsunagu responds to his discrimination with anger, then he only serves to prove others right. It's why you'll often see Mari and Yukihiro getting angry on his behalf, only for him to try and calm them down. Most of the discrimination he receives isn't overt, but rather snide comments made by characters in the background. This serves to illustrate how deep-rooted the discrimination against them is. This doesn't seem too different to our own world, however, until you get into its world building, which makes it abundantly clear just how much Tsunagu is fighting against. He can't even enjoy most outings with his friends, as he's legally prevented from attending many facilities. Perhaps my favorite example is when Mari visits Tsunagu at his own home. The beast folk village is gated off from the rest of Japan. Beast folk need permission to leave, while humans need permission to enter. These safety precautions were likely put in place due to a historical precedent. This puts Tsunagu in a unique position that differs him from minorities of our own world. Some members of his race have done wrong, which puts Tsunagu in a position where he has to defy all of the negative stereotypes that he'll be associated with. Tsunagu himself is an incredibly resilient person. To him, his goals are bigger than his emotions. He wants to become a doctor, allowing beast folk to receive medical treatment in a non-prejudiced environment. By achieving this through educating himself among humans, this will allow his kindness to break apart the stereotypes that set back his race. He wants his people to be seen not for their race, but rather for the contents of their character, the exact message that the civil rights activists of our own world fought for. The penultimate episode truly does a great job at highlighting just how bad things are for him. Tsunagu and Mari get caught having an intimate moment with each other, and the journalism club turns it into a hit piece. Anyone who knows these two would know that the rumors are false, and yet his teachers tell him not to go to school. Simply for existing as a beast folk, Tsunagu and his friends have to deal with rumors and backhanded comments. I particularly love Yukihiro's response to this. While he's typically the hyperactive, loyal, and lovable best friend, he speaks much less throughout this episode. Despite him having cheered up Tsunagu many times in the past, he has to stay silent in order for his anger not to spill out. The priorities of the school are truly twisted here. Instead of telling Tsunagu that he did nothing wrong, the school instead takes the cowardly route. After all, it is easier to reinforce prejudiced beliefs than it is to confront them. His class doesn't buy any of it, however, as they've seen him for all of the good that he's done. The anime is never in your face about the good he does for them, but you're able to see it in small ways throughout each episode. Mere exposure can often be enough to quell discrimination. In that sense, Tsunagu has achieved his goal, and yet he's unable to see it. That, combined with being given the option to resign, puts Tsunagu at a tricky spot, one where he could either protect the comfort of those who discriminate against him, or make the correct choice of choosing to live as the best person he can. There is one point I'll concede to, however, and it's the fact that I do genuinely dislike how small the sample size is in regards to the subject matter. Tsunagu is one of the good ones, is a phrase I've read pretty often, and it's indicative of this problem. I think the series presents just enough to show us its intentions, but I also have to grasp at straws here due to there only being 2 beast folk in the main cast. I think that, as we can see with Tsunagu and Kisara, beast folk are generally well-intentioned. If they weren't, I don't think Tsunagu's goal would be to help them as a doctor. We see that their society, at large, treats the negatives of their instincts seriously, as we see law enforcement being involved when Mari enters the Beastfolk village. It goes to show that Beastfolk are varied in how they act. It serves only to further illustrate the message that just because Beastfolk can harm humans due to their nature, it doesn't mean that they should, or that humans should make assumptions about them because of it. But I think in order to explain the extent to why this angle works for me, we'll have to go into explaining more about myself and how I relate to Tsunagu's struggles. I have autism, which I will admit comes with its differences. The primary one is that the disability is largely invisible, very unlike how much Tsunagu stands out. I, however, relate very heavily with his internal struggles. Society fears what is different, after all. Because of this, I hide my stimming, hide my habits, hide my media obsessions, hide my sensory issues, and hide my social ineptitude. It's extremely frustrating seeing people make assumptions about me because of the negative actions that people of my group have performed, those people often having been led to said actions through a constant barrage of bullying and discrimination. I fight every day with these assumptions weighing down on me, the very same way that Tsunagu does. Just like Tsunagu, however, I have to live with the fact that many aspects of my instincts and natures are fundamentally different from most of the world. Some will say that having an innocent until proven guilty mentality around the beast folk serves badly if the message is about racism. I would agree, as racism is an entirely illogical philosophy. Disability targets a different area of the human psyche, however. I am different, down to the way my brain is wired. Sure, my instincts aren't bad, the way that beastfolk urges are. Society, however, doesn't care. I agree that it's wrong for society not to care, but there's nothing I can do but accept that. That's why I, like Tsunagu, can only work to make myself into the best person I can be. I recognize why someone would dislike the implications of there being a justifiable reason for this discrimination to occur. Unlike the demons of Frieren, however, beastfolk are capable of empathy, and therefore are not worthy of discrimination. The reason I like its message is because their struggles with these urges shows exactly how far this story is willing to go in order to say that this discrimination is wrong. If it only resonates with a few, then I'm willing to accept that. But this show truly did strike a chord that I wasn't expecting it to. The elephant in the room, however, is Tsunagu's sexual urges, and how they relate to his relationship with Mari. I want to defend this aspect, as I personally believe it to be the most integral part to what makes this anime stand out so much. The reason why I enjoy these spicier scenes so much is that Tsunagu heavily struggles to control his sexual urges. This complicates the emotions of it a lot. In a vacuum, it looks like Tsunagu forcing himself on Mari, but since Tsunagu feels obvious guilt and shame over it, it complicates the morality of it. Mari, as she very much seems to enjoy when he's more forceful, also feels her own sense of guilt and shame, as she derives pleasure from Tsunagu struggling to fight against these instincts. It's highly probable that Mari would be willing to go all the way with him, but that's not what Tsunagu wants. If Tsunagu lost himself to Mari, then he'd be contradicting his goals. It's exactly why he avoids Mari for much of the first few episodes. Mari, however, separates herself from other shoujo protagonists through being stubborn to a fault. She knows that his discrimination is not justified, and she's angry that he doesn't do anything to dispel the false accusations around him. This is what brings them together, while their love is what keeps them together. When Tsunagu finally accepts his feelings toward Mari, that's when the series is able to fully explore its grasp on sexuality. Throughout the series, Tsunagu's goal is to show Mari why he loves her, instead of merely using her as a sexual outlet. His pure intentions, along with Mari's respect for his boundaries, are ultimately what allows these scenes to not be problematic. Mari, just like Tsunagu, struggles with her own human instincts, ones which make her love his forcefulness. Tsunagu, however, shouldn't be defined by the urges that turn her on. While it acts as a reasonable explanation for her initial attraction, it could never explain why she loves him. Thankfully then, Tsunagu is a very lovable person. He's kind, gentle, and considerate to a fault. The reason why I believe these elements work so well is because of how well they relate to our own world. Tsunagu and Mari have to fight through a forbidden romance, where the idea of them dating is frowned upon by society. As a result, this creates shame, and that shame turns into arousal, as our society conditions us to find sex shameful. This is part of why Mari is so enamored by Tsunagu's forcefulness, and yet, Tsunagu is right for wanting to take things more slowly. Sex may be beautiful, natural, and human, but it is not the same as romance. Sex should instead be treated as the end result of romance. This is why Tsunagu put so much stake into controlling his urges and developing this romance. Even so, when Tsunagu does lose himself, their excitement can't be ignored. Tsunagu mostly feels romantic excitement, knowing that a human has finally accepted him for who he is. Mari, meanwhile, feels sexual excitement from the shame that his discrimination forces onto their relationship. General audiences have been very hard on this anime, shaming it for its portrayal of sexuality. I can agree that it's easy to make fun of it. The title of this video is, in fact, a joke about it. I think the anime expected this kind of response, however, as its themes are directly baked into addressing it. After all, it's people who mock this relationship that only reinforce their shame and their arousal toward each other. However, there is nothing shameful about their love. They've set clear boundaries for each other, and it results in them being able to experiment with their sexual desires in a way that so many other anime are scared to depict. This show nails that fine line, and I don't think that these touchier subjects should be ignored in anime. To hell with people's discomfort. Art is meant to challenge the way that people think. And just like how people in this anime are prejudiced against beast folk, people in our own world are prejudiced against these honest portrayals of sexual desire and how they relate to the strength of love. This is why, despite being a shameless fetish manga, I have so much respect for its author. The story is honest because it doesn't ignore sex, the shame around sex, and how that battle needs to be fought. Most people have already written it off as crude, but I think that this show is beautiful. It's flawed, sure, but it's one which I am endlessly fascinated by because of its honesty.